Might explain that the General Hayes had two choices of going north. He could have gone east of the mountains, east of the lake, up the Dees River Valley. And he thought that was too heavily defended, so instead he thought he'd surprise the Germans by going up the east shore of the lake, knowing that there were these damn tunnels there. And fortunately, he had a dozen ducks sent ahead. I think he was lucky. I mean, it might have been a disaster. Yeah.
Speak.
What was General Hayes' plan for Lake Garda?
Well, he had two choices to pursue the Germans into the Alps. He could have gone up the Dees River Valley, east of the mountains, east of Lake Garda. Instead, he thought he would surprise the Germans by going up the east shore road of Lake Garda itself. That was a risky decision because that route goes through a series of 6 tunnels, very easy defendable, and there are steep cliffs behind those tunnels. Fortunately, he had the smarts to bring with him a dozen ducks, these amphibious trucks. And so on the morning of April 28th, when the 2nd Battalion 86 tried to get through tunnel number 1, the Germans blew it up immediately before they arrived. That was a significant barrier. It was you couldn't really climb up through the mountains above there, at least they didn't have the equipment of time. So what they did was to bring the ducks forward and flank that position by going out around them by boat. And that was risky too because the German artillery was coming in. But they made it, and using those ducks, they were able to circumvent these tunnels that were blown, and they were able to get up the lake. And so General Hayes' strategy worked, but it was a risky one. And it's amazing in retrospect that we had a 10th Navy as well as an Army to accomplish his objectives.
Could it have been a disaster?
It could have been a disaster, I believe. And but he was either lucky or skillful. And as Napoleon said, I want my generals to be lucky. In that sense, I think he lucked out.
Tell me a little bit about ducks circumnavigating the problems, the tunnels. And
Well,
maybe just talk about the duck disaster,
Yeah.
just in general.
Okay. I could add another thing about the 10th Navy.
Oh,
Let's see.
sure.
Yeah. It's often been quipped that the 10th had 3 elements to its Navy. We had ducks. No. There was another element to the 10th Navy. Actually, it was a. No, let me start again. Let me pause. I'm thinking. The sailing boats and lashed them together and sailed up the lake.
Oh, I did hear this. And they used the afternoon winds?
Yeah, and just they sailed up the
Parker
lake.
told me that.
They sailed up the lake. You have that on? That's really an amazing story.
Yeah. And they could only do it when the winds shifted, like in the afternoon?
Well, I forget, but they sailed up the lake, and that's how they got their artillery up there to help us. Do you have that recorded?
Yeah, Parker told me all about that.
Okay.
Maybe you could just talk about the one duck that didn't make it.
There was, of course, one tragedy on the evening of May 30th. No, there was, of course, one tragedy. On the evening of April 30, the 605th Artillery sent some men and guns across the lake on a duck aimed to get to Riva del Garda. A storm was blowing up. The ship was overloaded, and it sank with everyone on board but Thomas Huff drowned, a loss of 25 men. So that was one of the tragedies. They were the last men to lose their lives in combat with the 10th. There was actually another duck sank the day before, on the 29th. Colonel Gall, with his artillery units, were exploring the town of Torboli, and as they came close to the shore, the German tanks sank his duck. The whole party swam ashore safely, and they got away. So there were actually 3 ducks sank. The tragic one that was sunk on the 30th with a loss of 25 lives, Bill Gall's duck, which sank the day before when everyone swam ashore, and one duck was sunk 2 days before that was capsized in unloading along the shore, and no one was drowned.
about the first two ducks. Well, that was news to me. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what happened in subsequent tunnels when they were able to get back to the shore. The one that sticks out to me is Tunnel of the Dead.
Yeah. What was that, number 3, I think it was, or number 5?
I thought it was 5.
Number 5, okay. Well, there was a well-known tragic incident that at tunnel number 5, as the American soldiers of the 86th Regiment were going through it, as they came just to the other side, the Germans had a lucky hit with an 88 shell, which exploded just inside the tunnel, and there were large numbers of casualties of Americans who were killed and wounded in that tunnel. As it turned out, earlier that same day, the Germans had tried to blow that tunnel up, but the people who had their demolitions made a mess of the job, and instead they killed their own men and a number of horses. So as the soldiers marched through that tunnel later in the day, they passed dead German horses, dead German soldiers, and of course they had wounded Americans there. So they called it the Tunnel of the Dead.
Gruesome. That is gruesome. I interviewed one person who was one of those late-day marchers, and he said that their uniforms were still smoking. Kinda spooky. I wanted to move on to Yugoslavia.
Oh, right.
Just hop, skipping, and jumping.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
No.
Tom Brooks did most of Yugoslavia, but I just wanted to ask you if, I wanted to get the idea that it was really a coalition force. It just wasn't the 10th, that it was a
Yeah,
combination
okay.
of forces.
Yeah. People are confused, and they think only the 10th did everything.
Right.
I have a bit of note
Right.
here. Everybody else will have done better. You don't really need me, but go ahead.
Well, this is a coalition thing. This is one thing he talked a little bit about, but
Okay.
if you could do it a little, I
Okay.
appreciate it. I just want to talk about how going into, I want to say Yugoslavia, was a coalition thing. It wasn't just the 10th.
Right.
Who was it?
The first troops to arrive were the 2nd New Zealand Infantry Division, which got to Trieste on the 2 hours after the Yugoslavian Fourth Army had gotten there. So the first division to arrive was a New Zealand division. Later that day, another British division, the 6th Armored Division, arrived in the area, and the following day, the American 91st Infantry Division. So all in all, there were 4 divisions that were deployed in this peacekeeping effort. 2 British divisions and 2 American divisions, the 10th being one. We were the last to arrive, not because we were dilatory, but because we were busy fighting battles in Lake Garda. And we were called over after the other troops had arrived to take care of the mountainous areas farther north from Udine up toward the Yugoslav border.
These 4 divisions were key to stabilizing the area. What did those divisions together accomplish that diplomacy was slow to do?
Well, the best statement of that is given by Jeffrey Cox, who was an intelligence officer in the New Zealand 2nd Division and wrote a wonderful book. And he points out that the political situation was transformed by the mere fact that the British had a whole division in Trieste, armed, ready to go, and an important force. Not for the first time, it's the actual soldier who maintains our rights. And so the politicians can only go so far. In this case, the soldier, and that's what Cox says. Is that all right? That's not very good. Let me try it again.
Okay. What was it that these 4 divisions could do in terms of stabilization that diplomacy hadn't done?
Well, the answer to that is best expressed by Jeffrey Cox, who wrote a wonderful book of his experiences in the New Zealand 2nd Division. And he points out that once his division got to Trieste, the political situation was transformed by the fact that there were troops in town, a division of armed with tanks, and that the Germans had surrendered not to the Yugoslavs, but had surrendered to the British forces. So not for the first time, politicians can argue and persuade, but it's the soldier who guarantees our rights.
Now we've wrapped up the war, and so, talk a little bit about where it was rumored that the tents would be deployed.
Oh, yeah.
So you can see we're skipping over
Oh, yeah, that's right.
a big
Yeah.
ocean here.
Well, when we were at Camp Swift, there were
Oh,
rumors.
I was actually talking post-war.
Oh, post-war. Oh, post-war.
Once the Mediterranean theater was wrapped
Oh,
up.
but I had something to say about that.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Once we were at Camp Swift, there were rumors where we were going. One rumor was that we were going to fight in the jungles of Burma, something that made me feel very uncomfortable. In fact, it must have been more than a rumor because Hugh Evans prepared in our day room a model of Burma, and we were all memorizing the terrain features of Burma. And that may have been a plan, or may not. We wound up going not to Burma, which pleased me at least, and it may have been just an intelligence ploy, that they were pretending we were going to Burma just to confuse the enemy. Whether that was true or not, I have no idea. But we did think we were going to Burma, and I personally was relieved to be going to Italy, not the jungles of Burma.
Well, after you were sent home from Italy, where was it rumored that the 10th would be deployed next?
I heard no, just Europe. The only rumors I heard were that we were, no, I don't. We assume Europe, I think. No, say that
Weren't they going
again.
to send you to the mountains of Japan, post-war?
Oh, you're talking about post-war.
Post-war, yep.
Okay.
I'm still post-war.
Well, everyone in the 10th expected to participate in the invasion of Japan. I have a wonderful photograph that someone gave me of a lecture given on the fields outside of the town of Cividale in northeast Italy. And there you can see a picture of Japan on the wall of the lecture theater, outside actually. Let me try that again.
Okay. Where did the 10th expected to be deployed after Italy?
Every officer and man of the 10th expected to be sent to participate in the invasion of Japan. There's a mountainous country. We were mountain troops. We arrived late in the war, and it would be our turn to serve our country by fighting in Japan. Not a very pleasant prospect. I remember seeing a wonderful picture, which you may have here, showing a orientation session in a field outside of Cividale, where there are maps. So you can see maps of. That's not very good.
Well, let's just.
Well,
I'll let you do it again. This a little bit different. You could see what was going on in the Pacific Theater once the war was over in Europe.
Never forget about the photograph. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Where did the 10th expect to be deployed?
Every officer and man in the 10th expected to be deployed in the coming battle for Japan, and we expected to have a month leave at home, and be sent off to Italy. No.
And be sent off. You can
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah. That's not. I guess I'm getting tired.
Where we're at there.
Every officer and man in the 10th expected to be sent to Japan to participate in the invasion. We were mountain troops. Japan is notoriously mountainous, and we had arrived in the European theater late. It would be certainly our duty to serve our country by invading Japan. A frightening prospect. None of us, I'm sure, would have gotten home if it had actually come about.
What changed that?
Everybody knows. And all of us are grateful to President Truman for dropping the 2 atomic bombs and forcing the earlier surrender of Japan.
If you look at the mountain troops in general as a division, how many years in training, how much time in training versus how much time in battle?
Well, for my own career, is in 3 parts: 6 months training, 6 months in combat, and 6 months in the hospital. But for the division as a whole, we began forming, the 87th Regiment began forming in November 15th, 1941, just before Pearl Harbor, and we didn't go to Europe until Christmas time, 1944. And of course, the division was inactivated at Camp Carson, Colorado on November 30th, 1945.
So it's roughly 4 years in battle, 4 years in training, 4 years in battle?
Roughly 4 years in training. What are those figures again?
Wasn't it roughly 4 years in training,
Is
4
that way
years
it
in
comes out?
battle?
I didn't. I mean,
I mean, 4 years in training, 4 months in battle?
pardon me?
It's roughly four,
Is that what it is? I haven't counted it
well,
up.
41 to 45.
Yeah,
You
that's
trained more or less into January.
yeah.
And then February, March, April, May.
4 months in training, 4 years in training. Let's get this straight from November 41, 42, 43, 44, November 44, November 45, 4 years in training. And then what? January, February, March, April, May, 4 months, January,
You
February,
can throw
March.
January, that's 5.
5 months in total, okay.
Yeah.
4 years and 5 months, okay.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
Well, how many years in training, how many months in battle?
Remarkably, we had 5 years in training.
4 years.
Um,
Stickler.
Remarkably, we had 4 years in training and 5 months in combat.
How did the 10th Mountain casualties relate to general battle casualties among other divisions? Are they more or less commensurately proportional?
The 10th fought in Italy for such a short time, 5 months, that our total casualties were much less than other divisions. A typical division that started fighting in Italy on May 1943, 20 months before we got there, had over 100% casualties. Whereas we, by fighting a short war, we were in that sense lucky. Although we had 1,000 men killed, and
But for the amount of time you fought, they
Yeah.
were
yeah,
proportionate, right?
Our casualty rates were, let's say, there's a lot of argument about this. It depends. I guess it's true that I'm trying to think of our because the people get very sensitive about it.
Casualty
No, it was
rates.
it was not, we were casualty rates for other divisions during their times of major battles were similar. But, yeah.
Right, okay. Hey, can you comment at all about the idea that some of the artillery duds were intentionally duds because of conscripted
I've
slave
heard
labor?
that, and there are duds, and I know of cases, but I don't know whether that's true.
No, if
Maybe
it's
it's
true.
just bad manufacturing.
You think it might just be bad?
It's nice to believe it.
Can you comment at all about, in general, why German resistance was really stiff sometimes, like Delatracia, and kind of lax? Did it have to do with SS?
I really don't know.
Presence.
I mean, whether the SS stiffened the things or whether these were mountain troops.
I mean, there were definitely times when they gave way to the 10th, and there's
Well,
definitely times when they dug in.
may have been strategic retreats. Maybe they wanted to, maybe that was a plan to move back and do something else. I don't know enough to answer that question.
Well, these are all the questions I have.
Good.
Do you have anything, well, no, wait. I always end with, is there, something you want to add? Something I missed? Later on, you're going to say, oh, I wish we'd talked about that.
No, I'm happy.
Do you want to look at your notes?
Yeah, I don't.